what you do with the shadow is what the big deal is, right? What you do with the light and the shadow and how they mix and how you layer them. That's how you create depth and feeling in a photo from the perspective of the light and shadow. Hey, I'm Gavin Seim. I am a PPA master photographer based in Central Mexico. What we're really here today is talk about how to do masks better and which does masking better, Lightroom or Capture One. And we're also gonna dig in, I just released Elegance 5, so if you use that, I'm gonna be showing you how to use it, but if you don't use my Elegance 5, that's fine also, because you're gonna see and get some ideas of how to do your own speed masks and your own methods in doing this. The big thing in apps like Lightroom and Capture One right now is masking. Yeah, some people might say, oh, it's like the AI generation features. I don't think so. I don't think most photographers really wanna be building their images with AI slump. But masking's a different thing. Masking goes back to the darkroom, right? We did masking, we did burning, we did dodging, and all it is now is it's a battle in these apps, which both process images great, to mask well and to make those selections easier. So when we say AI masking, all the AI is doing is making a selection. When you come into Lightroom, when you come into Capture One, and you're trying to mask, why? Why do you want to mask? Because a great photo is about shadow. Why do I always teach in shadow hackers classes and on my videos, like look for shadow first and build your image around the shadow, then see the light? Because it helps separate. Ultimately, I'm out here in this giant waist-high grass or whatever it is I'm doing. I'm out here in a real world that's three-dimensional, and I'm taking a photo that's two-dimensional. It's not always about being the sharpest. It's to convey the feeling, the emotion of that three-dimensional world in a two-dimensional world. You think about keying a subject for its background, and you look at simple masks like I'm doing in Lightroom and Capture One, where I'm just darkening the background a little bit. It's a fairly easy thing to do. Just darken the background a little bit, you separate the subject. There's a lot of ways to do these masks. Let's go back to the studio. All right, we got this. It's totally under control. Even though my photos out there kind of suck. On the Hassie, maybe not. They might be good. First thing we're gonna do is come into Lightroom. Now, if you need to know how to install speed masks, you can go to seimfx.com/help, and I have videos for installing all kinds of presets. But in essence, here's what I want you to remember. In Lightroom and in Capture One, speed masks are just develop presets or style. That is to say, they just show up as a develop preset. You can import the pack as a develop preset. And if you go to Capture One, same deal, you're gonna go into the custom styles, and we're at same place I put Filmist and Natural HDR and everything in there, you're going to see Elegance 5. Of course, in Capture One, you have a style pack, and in Lightroom, you're importing a zip. Let's look at then what we can do with speed masks and how I've set them up. And if you're making your own, you can also make your own mixes. I spend thousands of hours experimenting and testing and making masks and making film presets and all this stuff and dialing them in so they work as much across all images as possible. With a speed mask, the key is simple. You kind of want a mask that does everything, that does these combos. Because what happens is if you go over here to masks each time and then build mask, subject, sky, background, then you have to come in and you have to individually edit all these layers. Masks keep getting more powerful. There keeps getting to be more options and separations and masks available. But what this means is you could be going in and editing a dozen different masks and tweaking those and manipulating them. It's not the way to use masks. The only effective way to use masks is to do them in a speed mask. Because if you get a bunch of masks, you got to mesh them, like I talked about in my initial video when I made Elegance 5. If one mask doesn't jive with the other, you kind of get this weird cut and things don't work. So you really need to take your time to dial in this mask with the mask adjacent to it. And that's why it's so important that once you get a good mix, that becomes your speed mask. That's what I've done in making Elegance. So if you're building these manually, you get it all dialed in over here in the masking, and you'd have all these layers, and then you go over here and you would save those as a develop preset with only the relevant layers selected. And the same in Capture One. You'd come over here to style, and then you could go up here to three little dots and save the style, and then only save those layers and turn everything else off. Now, Capture One's a little more finicky on this. We'll talk about that a little later in terms of what it lets you save. And then realistically, you would apply that and you would tweak it more and you would apply it to another image and tweak it more until all those masks mesh together really well. Now I could add a simple old school brush mask, right? And I could brush it in and then I could adjust its settings. It's important to understand that when a mask is selected, you can also come over here and you can apply a local adjustment preset. This was the old way before we actually had all these AI masks and things like that. These are the ones included in Elegance, where you can say, okay, I could say apply the burn brush to this mask, and you can see it's now darkening. Now you can install these or not, because all speed masks already have settings defined. A lot of times we're not using these that much anymore. If you're still using like Lightroom 6 or something like that, yeah, these are the presets you have for masking. So these local adjustment presets only apply to Lightroom Classic. And frankly, you probably won't need them that much, because as you build these masks, all the settings are going to be in the masks, whether you're in Lightroom or Capture One. Each layer is going to have its corresponding settings, and you can adjust those as needed. So the local adjustment presets aren't quite as big of a deal as they used to be. Now, when it comes to the speed masks, those are across all the current versions. So Lightroom Classic, Lightroom Web, Camera Raw can use them as well, and of course, Capture One as well. Whether you're in Capture One or Lightroom, you want to be able to apply a mask that works for the kind of image you're doing. If you look here, we kind of have some favorites at the top. Then we have nature, portrait, sky, tone. I've categorized these. Here's a portrait in a little bit of harsh light. And if you go here, we have the backlighters blend. So this is specifically for the kind of images that have that backlight light going on. But let's look at what it's actually doing. It's not a radical preset, but what it is doing is this simple dimensional stuff that I'm talking about. So notice how we've keyed the background. The background is a little darker, the subject's a little lighter. We have hair, we have skin, face, a little bit going on. There's not a ton of masks in this, but the masks that are there are each individually dialed in for this type of image. Okay, now something important. Just because a mask says this is the portrait backlighters blend or this is the street blend doesn't mean it's the only thing it'll work for. It just means that it's designed around that the layers are meshed together to work for those kind of scenes. Let's come into Capture One and look at this. You can see the same thing. Now, some of the presets are different. I try as much as possible to have not only the same organization, but the same tools in here. But Capture One is more limited on what we can do with masks, and we'll talk about that a little more when we get to the comparison part, talking about the goods and bads of both of these. Now, when you mouse over, you see previews here in Capture One as well. But if I do Tone Restore Duo, note that the previews are pretty bad in Capture One about this. They're pretty fast, but they're pretty bad. Notice that the preview had nothing to do with the final result, but the preview was showing us the thing that had no relation whatsoever. So don't trust the preview too much. Now, if you notice here, this is only 2 masks, and these aren't actually even AI masks. These are Luma masks that deal with shadow and highlight. I have spent so much time just refining those 2 masks, because in both these apps, Luma masks are like the fastest way to destroy an image. Getting the right feather off, the right mesh, as I call it, between the shadows and the highlights and the midtones of these masks, particularly on Luma masks, is really, well, it sucks. And so once I get it dialed in, I run with it. And that's what you see in these refined and updated masks in Elegance 5. And if you're making your own versions of these masks, you're going to want to do the same. Just because a mask works on one image and you save it does not mean it's going to work on another image, and therefore that you have a good speed mask. It takes a lot of refinement. But once you get it there, then you're not dialing it in every time. Sure, you can come in and in Capture One, you can individually turn the opacity up or down on these, or you could duplicate it if you want a stronger effect. In Lightroom, it's the same, but actually a little bit better. If I do the Tone Restore Duo in Lightroom, you can see that it then applies both of these masks up here, which I can of course select and turn up and down individually like I can in Capture One, but I can also go up here like with any develop preset and turn the entire group, the entire application of preset that I just applied up or down. And this is really useful. If you go up too high, usually it breaks things, but sometimes you want to go up a little higher, or a lot of times what's actually more common is I want to dial down a bit. So I'll go to 70 or 80% and just dial it down. Lightroom also tends to be a little slower. We all know that especially when it comes to masking, Lightroom is a hog of system resources. I talk about this a lot, and Adobe really needs to do something about it. There's a video here on the channel about speeding up Lightroom in general, and you can do things in the develop module like using smart previews and things like that, and that helps. Having a fast hard drive with your previews on it, that helps a lot. But Lightroom is a dog when it comes to system resources. That doesn't mean Capture One doesn't also slow down with these masks. It's worth noting that most of these images already have like a base development process. Maybe I've put a natural HDR or a filmist or something like that. We're focusing on what we can add on top of that with masks, and that usually is something I'll do as the last step. Not only so I can develop a baseline for all the images, but because masks in Capture One and Lightroom do slow things down. And so if I add those at the end and then I can copy and paste them to all the other images that are similar, it makes the workflow more efficient. Now let's go to nature here and let's do big landscape, or how about the big HDR man? Now the more masks you add, the longer it takes. But you can see here, as you see this pop on, you can see there's a lot of masks. This is something Lightroom is now doing where it has all these separate things: vegetation, artificial ground, natural ground. You can see that some of these aren't applicable. It didn't detect a subject. It didn't detect architecture or mountains. It doesn't mean you need to delete those. The beauty of having speed masks is you can build all the relevant, all the pertinent masks for a given situation and have them in one click. Then you can turn them all up or down to get the look you want, or you can individually select those masks and turn them up or down. And you can see here that all those masks combined and carefully meshed together so they don't interfere work beautifully. Now, what do I mean by mesh together, and why is this such a big deal? The more masks you get, the more separation you get. So let's say we selected the water mask, okay? If the water mask was pushed up too hard, for example, maybe there was too much exposure or too much shadow, and it might look good in one photo, but then you would come to another photo and save that, let's say, as a speed mask, and it would look like ass. Sorry, but if masks don't mesh well, that's a lot of times what you get. So it's very important, especially in these auto-selected masks, that you're thinking, okay, if water touches sky or if sky touches horizon, how does that mesh? Here's another example. Now, we could do one of these landscape masks that adds like 12 masks, but I could also just say, hey, let's go down to sky. So I could go down and say, let's do Sky AI Grad Super Classic. And what this is going to do is add a sky mask, and then I can turn it up and down. If you click on this mask, you can see that there's a grad built into it. And you can actually select that grad if you want to, and you can manipulate it. What that grad is doing is helping keep the cutoff of the sky selection from being too harsh. It also makes the sky mask a little bit less intense. Let me show you what I mean. If we go here and go to Sky Super Restore, this here is more intense, right? It's bringing back more of the sky. You can see that the layer name is the same. It didn't add a new layer. It just adjusted that sky mask layer that they had the same name, and it just redefined the settings. Now, it should be noted that this is different for Capture One users. In Capture One, if you apply one sky mask and then the other sky mask, it just adds a new mask. So you're now stacking them. Simple enough. Of course, we can turn this up or down. And you can look at this and you can turn it on and off and see how much we're restoring this sky. This does not have the grad enabled. And so you can see that the cutoff of where the sky meets the foliage is a little more intense. Sometimes this works good. And I've got this mask meshing pretty well with it hitting the horizon. But you'll notice here that the gradient is still in here even when you apply this preset. It's just turned off. You can turn the gradient on this particular preset, and it looks like it's making the mask weaker. What it's actually doing is just gradually feathering it off as it meets the horizon. Are you seeing what I mean here? You have all these different masks and all these variables. You would never tinker with these masks this much if you do them manually. If you just built 10 masks of like hair and face and all this stuff, you're going to quickly try and refine them and do them manually, and it's still going to take way too long. At that point, you might as well just go to Photoshop, because masking is more fluid there anyhow, even though it's not all AI generated. You got to manually do burning and dodging and stuff like that more. However, it works really well. And there's still a time to go to Photoshop to do masking and burning and dodging and details on your best images, because you can get more refinement. That said, when you take these masks and they're ultra refined and meshed really well, and then they're saved into a speed mask, that's peak for masking in either one of these apps. Sometimes it's a big mask combo, and sometimes it's as simple as a sky. Let's do the big street mixer. You'll notice, particularly in the Lightroom versions, because Lightroom has a lot of new landscape and land related features, buildings, things like that. These are things that don't exist yet in Capture One. I've called these big because they have a lot. Now you can see that this might be a little intense. Let's turn it up. Let's turn it down. I'm going to turn it down to about 70%, right? Now I'm going to move the exposure overall of the image up because I've balanced out the shadow and the sky and stuff. But look at this. There's a lot of masks in here. Again, it's ignoring the ones that don't apply. But this one is kind of a street focus. It's thinking about the texture of the ground and the architecture and how it relates with the sky. It doesn't mean that this wouldn't be a good preset for a landscape or another scene, only that it's kind of geared toward that in terms of how it's dealing with clarity and dehaze and color mixes and all this stuff. Portrait masking, the same thing. If I go to this here, taken in the ruins of the old hacienda, I've already put like a film mist preset on this. Okay, I just want to get that separation. Remember, 3D world, 2D plane. We're trying to create layers. We're trying to use shadow to separate, like I talked about in the beginning of the video. Let's use portrait big outdoor mix right here. Instead of just like skin and foreground and background, it's also including things like landscape features and architecture and things like that that can benefit this kind of scene. But look how many masks. Oh my gosh. Like I would never build this many manually and dial all these in, but here in a speed mask, we can do it. Every single one of these masks is dialed in to mesh well with the others and create a balance. But good masking, just like good burning and dodging was in the darkroom, it's not about like, oh, that looks super extreme. Great editing on a photo is not about having somebody look at it and say, wow, you really edited that to death, didn't you? No, that sucks. You don't want the viewer thinking about your edit. You want to get the best photo you can in camera, the best shadow you can in camera. If you've never been to one of my Shadow Hackers free live workshops, you want to come because I really focus on getting good shadow and dimensionality and drama in the camera. But what masking is doing is just an extension of what we learned in the darkroom long ago. And that is that we create separation and tone. Tone is the least understood factor in photography. And when Ken Whitmire first taught me that, I was like, well, that seems kind of extreme. But over time, I realized photographers are terrified of the dark. They're terrified of shadow. They're always crushing everything into flat, boring midtones because it feels safe. We want that separation. That gives our photos strength. But it's not always about extremes. If you look at this little photo here, maybe I don't need this big portrait combo. I'm just going to go down to tone. And let's do the front and back depth. Most of these are named. This is why I don't need to go over every individual one. Most of them are pretty self-descriptive. See what's happening here? This one is two masks. One is darkening the background and one is lightening the subject. So even though it's a fairly simple mask, they're balanced to work with each other, to not be too extreme. And what do? They just give a little pop. They give a little depth. They put the emphasis where you want it. On this case, our little guy here with his umbrella, right? Some of the masks are big, huge combos, and some of them are simple. Here's the portrait basic simple trio. It just gives a little pop. It just has a foreground, a background, and a little foreground softer gradients mask. And what are we getting? Just a little bit of separation here in this image, a little less contrast in that background so that the focus is more on our subject. If you're using My Elegance masks, the best way is just to play around. Kind of use their names as a guide, but just play around with them. If you're building your own masks, do the same thing. Find combinations that work and save those as speed masks, then spend time refining them. You're going to need to spend hours refining those masks across different images, which is what I do when I'm building these and refining these. And eventually that mask will get to a point of what you're seeing here with Elegance, where you can just apply it and it works virtually every time. That's the goal with a speed mask. What we're seeing now in this battle between Lightroom and Capture One is that, as they've been for years, Capture One is behind. Now, some people love Capture One and think it's better for other things. And to talk more about that, we should really go to the Lightroom and versus Capture One review that's here on the channel that I did this year as well. Today, I want to talk specifically about masks. Let's actually look at what Capture One can do compared to what we've seen in Lightroom. And you'll notice that as much as possible, I've tried to make things the same. The thing is, there's some features that are different. Let's go to Portrait Full Classic, and you'll see that it's going to run this now. Capture One has been improving this year, and there's more masks, and you can see it building all these masks down here and doing this portrait blend. And we have skin and face, and we have eyes, and we have lips and hair, and all this stuff. And yeah, it works. One thing that I really do like about Lightroom that is a huge asset is the ability to just turn everything up and down together as one mask. You can't do that in Capture One. You can select the individual layers and you can turn them down, or you can turn them, well, up to 100. You can't go over 100, which in Lightroom you can. Now you could duplicate the layer and therefore duplicate the effect. That's one option. Another thing I've noticed is that Capture One is having more problems with its AI selection. If I select this image and do a simple mask like background fade, okay, it's supposed to select the background, but it's not selecting it correctly. It's not just like selecting it a little weird, it's actually like cropping it out like it's not all there. Now, this has to be a bug because obviously that's not the intended result of background selection, and I've noticed it does this on some images and not others. Hopefully we'll see that fixed soon. But in general, I've noticed the precision of these masks is less, but still there's a lot of control here. Give me the AI Beauty Trio and it's going to apply it and it's going to build my layers. But you can see here, here's another one where that background mask layer is wigging out. And honestly, in the past, I didn't notice that with the background selection. So it seems to be a bug. You guys let me know in the comments if you're having this problem and or if it seems to be fixed now, depending on when you're watching this video. But a lot of the issues of why I can't do quite as many masks in Capture One is just that there's not as many masks. We have a subject mask, great. We have a background mask, great. We have people masks, and that's where you get the body and the face. That's actually new this year in 2025. Okay, and these are good. These are powerful tools. There's no sky mask though, and this is such an essential thing. So the sky adjustments at this point just have to be background masks, but of course that includes more than just the sky. The other thing is there's basic fundamental lacks in masks. For example, let's say I made a new mask and I did something as simple as a gradient in Capture One. So I'm going to make a gradient and maybe I darken it up a little bit, right? If I then go to Style and go to Save this mask, you'll notice that it has an exclamation mark. It won't allow brushed or even gradient masks to be saved. All it'll do is an empty layer. What this means is I can't save something as simple as a gradient mask, which is very useful, into a mask, much less do like I showed you in Lightroom, where we used a gradient mask to subtract from a sky mask and combine those two together. So in every way, Lightroom masks are more advanced. Now, if you've watched my Lightroom versus Capture One review, they're both really good. And some people swear by Capture One and say it's better for Fuji files, even though that's not really the case anymore. But if you like Capture One, I get it, use it. It's not a battle. It should be between these companies because competition's good for us. But for you, the user, the creative, you should use whatever software works for you. All I'm saying is there's limitations in masks in Capture One. If you're trying to save your own speed masks, you're going to run into those limitations. If you're using Elegance, you're going to see that I've done the best I can to work around those and make sure you have all the masks you can. As Capture One improves their masks and updates these things and catches up to Lightroom, I'll absolutely be building in updates. I do lots of free updates on all my presets, and you'll see those coming down the pipes as new options become available in both apps. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Capture One is introducing some things that Lightroom doesn't have, like this new retouch option here, which has some pretty cool stuff that's specific to the face. Now, even though technically it doesn't apply this to a layer, it's just applying it on the base layer, there is some cool stuff like evening up the skin of the face. And in particular, one that really stood out to me is dark circles under the eyes or eye bag. If we zoom in here and we turn this up or down, you can see it actually is doing a really nice job. It's not crazy intense, but it's just about right. If you apply, let's say, Portrait Full Glamour or Full Classic, you'll see that those speed masks have actually implemented settings as well from Retouch. So you don't need to do both. But what you'll also see in Capture One is, where applicable, I have also made some presets in Capture One version that don't exist in the Lightroom version, like the Portrait X eye bag fixer or facial retouch only, whereas these focus specifically on those separate from adding other masks. Remember, the goal of all these presets, all these speed masks, is to make us more efficient at creating that refinement, that retouching, that separation of tone and shadow and light. That's been the goal of all of this, whether you're using the Lightroom version or the Capture One version or building your own speed masks in either one of these apps. This is the way to use masking in both of these apps. And I hope we'll keep the pressure up on these companies. Lightroom in particular, maybe instead of adding a bunch of new masks next time, they should improve the performance. And Capture One, maybe instead of talking fluff and doing big live streams, acting like features are big, they should get their masks up to speed a little more and give us basic things like saving gradient masks, like a sky mask, things like that. I'm not here to beat up on any one of these in these videos, but in terms of the original question, who has the most powerful masking as of right now in 2025? Lightroom, hands down, beats Capture One in terms of what we can do with masks. That said, there's a lot you can do with Capture One, and I have implemented every ounce of that, as those of you that use my Elegance 5 presets will see. And if you tinker around enough, you'll start finding ways that you can also make your own speed masks. But I do hope you'll check out Elegance 5. I'll put a link in the comments. Go check it out. Like all my tools, it's guaranteed, because I know once you use it, you'll be like, wow, there's no point in me spending hundreds of hours refining my own. This works, and then I can give it my own look. However you do your speed masks, please do them, because they make masks incredible. I hope you guys found this useful. I hope we continue to see all of these improve, and I'll keep making videos about how to improve them. Go play with Elegance 5, enjoy it. Let me know if you have any questions, leave a comment, send me an email. I'm here to help. We'll see you soon. Peace.